I would normally ask for a show of hands of who knows what the RSS is, who's heard of it and can define it. And for those of you who may be techie, no, I'm not talking about really simple syndication. I'm talking about this. Okay, I've had enough of that myself for the moment. This is the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, a name which stands for National Volunteer Corps. This is the RSS marching through India's southern city of Hyderabad on Christmas Day of 2019. The city of Hyderabad has one of the densest Muslim populations in India. They're over 30% of the population. And remember how I mentioned that this march occurred on Christmas Day. This march symbolizes the RSS's agenda. It's a Hindu nationalist paramilitary, which has the goal of turning India into a Hindu Rashtra, or an exclusively Hindu nation. And it wants to eliminate, I said eliminate, Christians and Muslims from the country. The RSS is the fountainhead of what's known as Hindutva ideology. Well, what is Hindutva? The US Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is an entity of the State Department, says that Hindutva is an ideology that treats non-Hindus as foreign to India, meaning it treats people like Christians and Muslims especially, who are Indian and who live in India with Indian citizenship. It treats them as though they're foreigners. Amnesty International, as you can see on the screen, has said that Hindutva is the political ideology of an exclusively Hindu nation. Basically, it's the idea that India is, always has been, and always should be a country of, for, and only for Hindus. Now, Hindutva is not Hinduism. Basically, it's synonymous with Hindu nationalism. Think Christian nationalism or Islamic nationalism or Jewish nationalism or any other religious nationalist political ideology which seeks to combine politics and religion. And just like Christian nationalism, for instance, Hindu nationalism is not Hinduism. Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Hindu nationalism is not Hinduism. Hindutva is not Hinduism. Hindutva is propagated by what's called the Sangh Paravar. The Sangh Paravar is a big overarching family of Hindu nationalist organizations which all propagate this Hindutva ideology. And at the head of it is the mothership, the RSS. Now, the RSS at the head has dozens of special interest subsidiaries that trickle down underneath it, which all have specific purposes. And I'm not going to get into all of them, but the most important of these are listed here. Give me one moment. I'm in a hotel and I have somebody at my door. My apologies for that. The RSS's web of organizations, known as the Sangh Paravar, this family of Hindutva, has in particular, you'll see on the top left here, the VHP, which is the religious wing of the RSS. It has the Bajrang Dal, which is not actually listed, but which is the youth wing of the VHP, which is the religious wing of the RSS. It has over here the BJP, that is the political wing of the RSS. It has the ABVP, the student wing. It has Seva Bharati, which is its charitable wing, which is engaged in activities, so some actual good activities, but activities related to providing food aid and such things. Now, as you can see, most importantly for our conversation today, all of these groups, all of these organizations within this broad family of the RSS have parallel affiliates abroad. They have international wings, all of which are present here in the US. And we'll come back to that. But I just want you to take a look here. For instance, you have RSS in India, you have the HSS abroad, you have the BJP in India, or the political wing of the RSS, you have the international wing of the BJP, the overseas friends of the BJP. Moving on, the question becomes, just how significant, how powerful, how influential is the RSS, or the Sangh Paravar, or for short, we'll call it the Sangh? Well, the RSS itself has an estimated 6 million direct members. And I say estimated because there are no public figures available and they do not release that information. And notably, that 6 million figure only includes members who participate in daily activities. Daily activities. 6 million people who gather once a day to participate in training with the RSS. And the VHP, the religious wing itself, has an estimated 7 million members. The Bajrang Dal, the youth wing of the VHP, has an estimated 5 million members. Combined, these three groups alone easily constitute a force surpassing 15 million members or more. 15 million militant Hindu nationalist trained members within this family of Hindutva. Now, the current chief of the RSS is Mohan Bhagwat. And since 2014, the RSS has grown so rapidly that Mohan Bhagwat in 2018 boasted that the RSS can prepare military personnel within 3 days, something that it would take the army, he said, to do in 6 to 7 months. So here you have the chief of the RSS, of this Hindu nationalist paramilitary organization, bragging that his organization is capable of fielding a military ready force much faster than even India's own army. So the RSS, beyond that, actually, it appears that one of their next goals is they're interested in taking over India's military. That appears to be one of their next major goals, and especially judging by Bhagwat's boast about how quickly the RSS can field a military force. Well, in 2019, the RSS opened its first army school to train children to become officers in the armed forces, to raise up members of the RSS who can be inserted, infiltrated into the armed forces in the officer ranks, with the ultimate goal, one would presume, of controlling the military. In 2021, Bhagwat last year actually said that he has plans for the military, for the paramilitary, the RSS, to reach every household in India and to establish branches in all the villages, in every single village of the country by 2025. 2025 is a particularly notable date because that year marks the paramilitary's centennial anniversary. In 2025, the RSS will turn 100 years old. But while Bhagwat does have this goal of establishing RSS branches in all the villages of India, the RSS has already reached all the halls of national power in India. The RSS rules India. I was talking about the family of Hindu nationalist organizations, the Sangh Paravar, and it's important to come back to this one, the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party. It's one of RSS's most important subsidiaries. It's also the largest political party in the world as the political wing of the RSS, with an estimated 180 million or more members. And that is according to the BJP itself, which has put out some public figures. And these members include people like, of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the president, the home minister. The home minister, Amit Shah, pay particular attention to that one. The reason it's so relevant that he's a member of the RSS is because the duties of the home minister include being in charge of maintaining internal law and order in the country. Oh, and beyond that, almost 75% of all of the cabinet ministers in India's current government are members of the RSS or of one of its subsidiaries. Now, in 2019, Arundhati Roy, I hope many of you have heard of her. She's an internationally renowned Indian journalist, author. She warned that, and I quote, as you can read along on the screen, during Modi's second term, the RSS has stepped up its game. No longer a shadow state or a parallel state, it is the state. Day by day, we see examples of its control over the media, the police, the intelligence agencies. Worryingly, it appears to exercise considerable influence over the armed forces too, as you might recall from the slides, a couple slides back about Bhagwat boasting about the RSS's ability to turn out a field and armed force significantly faster than the army, about the RSS establishing training school to get RSS members inserted as officers in the army. Now, Roy says worryingly. Why? Why is it worrying? What is so concerning about the RSS exerting so much influence in India? Well, the RSS is the world's oldest, largest, and fastest growing fascist movement and organization. And you can see here a few details about it. It was founded in 1925, which happens to have been the same year that Hitler published his Mein Kampf Manifesto, and the same year that the SS, that organization responsible for the Holocaust, was founded. And the RSS also embraces a Nazi-inspired fascist ideology. And that term gets thrown around a lot, but in this case, I consistently come back to it and persistently insist on using it, because calling the RSS and its ideology Nazi-inspired is not hyperbole or exaggeration, but is based in actual historical fact. This is the RSS founder, K.V. Hedgewar. Now, K.V. Hedgewar founded the RSS in 1925. He had this mission. His mission was to organize the entire Hindu society and to put into reality, in his words, that this, India, is a nation of Hindu people, just like, in his words, Germany is a nation of Germans, just like Germany is a nation of Germans. Well, keep in mind that when Hedgewar was saying this, he was saying it right around the 1930s, just as Hitler was taking over Germany and turning it into a nation of Germans and only for Germans, turning it into a Nazi dictatorship. Now, Hedgewar said about the RSS that it must continuously keep growing and that their goals could only be achieved if the organization grows continuously and rapidly. And I want to highlight the particularly menacing nature of Hedgewar's call to organize the entire Hindu society. I don't want that to go overlooked, because within the paradigm of that statement, for the RSS's founders, their new paramilitary could not simply serve as an organization within the sphere of the Hindu religion, such as, for instance, an organization within Christianity or an organization within Islam. But the RSS had to become the sole custodian of Hinduism, a head dictating and controlling the actions of every segment of the religion. And this vision is explicitly stated by the RSS today, which, as you can see from its website, openly says that it wants to expand so extensively that everything related to the religion will be engulfed into its system. and I'm just going to read this out. I want to highlight this. The aim of the song is to organize the entire Hindu society, and not just to have a Hindu organization within the ambit of the society. The aim of the song is to expand so extensively that each and every individual and traditional social institution, like family, caste, profession, educational and religious institutions, etc., are all to be ultimately engulfed into its system. The RSS today in 2022 openly states that its goal is to be in control of every aspect of life of every Indian. So, the RSS's belief being that being Indian means being Hindu, and their mission is to control everything about Hinduism with the RSS at the head. Now, after Hedgavar, who founded or co-founded the RSS, came this man. We had the first head of the RSS, and then he was replaced by a man named Gilbarca. He is, as you can see, the second longest, the longest serving and the most influential chief of the organization. He's basically the ideological father of the RSS. He served for 33 years from 1940 to 1973. The period of his service is important to notice, 1940 being a particularly significant time in world history. Hedgavar founded the RSS, but Gilbarca molded, influenced, and articulated the real meat of the RSS's ideology. And he detailed his views in two manifestos, the first of which was published in 1939. 1939, a year before he became head of the RSS, and again, a particularly significant date in world history. What were Gilbarca's views that he detailed in these manifestos? Well, he believed that everybody in India is born as a Hindu. He believes that only Hindus are, quote unquote, children of the soil. He believes that converting away from Hinduism basically makes you, if you live in India, if you're an Indian and you convert away from Hinduism, it basically makes you somebody with divided loyalty, who has succumbed to divided loyalty in place of having undivided and absolute loyalty to the nation. He believes that conversion away from Hinduism makes you a traitor, and it means that you have joined the camp of the enemy. And he believed that Christians and Muslims in particular were in some sort of conspiracy together against India to break apart the nation, to partition the country. He also believed that, focusing specifically on Christians and Muslims, that these people are foreign elements, internal threats, and once again, in so many words, traitors. He thought that Muslims are rabidly anti-national. Christians, he thought that Christians are bloodsuckers and that they will forever remain in India as hostiles. He believed that Muslims and Christians were subjects to a foreign mental complexion that they must give up in order to be considered members of the national life. And he claimed that it was impossible to have national unity without fusing everybody together. And this he wrote in context. This he wrote in context of Christians and Muslims, without fusing everybody together into the Hindu way of life. You can't be an Indian Christian, you can't be an Indian Muslim, you can't be an Indian Sikh, you can't be an Indian Buddhist unless you follow the Hindu way of life. He also argued that every race possesses the indisputable right of excommunicating from its nationality all those who, having been of the nation for ends of their own, turned traitors and entertained aspirations contravening or differing from those of the national race as a whole. And this specific passage he wrote in context in his manifesto of pointing to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. He pointed to Nazi Germany and said, look at them, Nazi Germany is an example of how every race possesses the right to excommunicate those who living within the nation have turned traitors, et cetera, et cetera. He also believed that the foreign races, by whom he means Christians and Muslims in particular, must, so on and so forth, must entertain no idea but those of the glorification of the Hindu race and culture. And that if they do anything other than that, that they must be stripped of their, one second, let me find my spot. That they must be stripped of their citizens' rights. That if you're a Christian or a Muslim or some other religion living in India that is not a Hindu, that if you do anything but, if you even entertain any idea, but the routine glorification of the Hindu race and culture, well, then you should lose your citizens' rights. So keep in mind, please do keep in mind that these specific comments, next comments, actually all of these comments, were written in 1939. 1939 was just when Hitler was launching the Second World War with Poland. He'd already laid the groundwork for the Holocaust. And the first pogrom against the Jews, Kristallnacht, had already occurred. The whole world already knew what Hitler's goals were. They already knew about Hitler. They didn't know the full extent of it, but they were already aware of Hitler's genocidal intent and his territorial expansionist aspirations. So in that context, Gilbarca wrote, praising Nazi Germany, that in Nazi Germany had seen the ancient race spirit reawaken, the race spirit which once prompted the Germanic tribes to overrun the whole of Europe, and which were soon to cause Hitler to attempt to overrun the whole of Europe. He compared that to the people of India, especially to the members of the RSS, within them, just like within Nazi Germany, their race spirit had once again been roused. And then most notoriously, ominously, shockingly, Gilbarca specifically pointed to the Nazi treatment of the Jews. Now, the Holocaust had not yet occurred, but Kristallnacht had. The laws against the Jews were already in place, and the world was already aware that there was an attempt to cleanse the Jews from Germany, which was underway. And keeping that in mind, Gilbarca, knowing that and aware of that already, he loved it. He called it out, and he called it. He pointed to how Germany was attempting to keep up the purity of the race and its culture by purging the country of the Semitic races, which he viewed as race pride manifested at its highest. He viewed it as an example of how multiculturalism is impossible, of how you can't have different races and different cultures living together. And he also viewed it as a model to follow, a model that should be adopted in India. Yes, he viewed the groundwork that had been laid for the Holocaust as something that should be transplanted into India and implemented there. Now, is it any surprise then that for the past 97 years of its existence, the RSS has regularly engaged in acts of extreme violence, considering the origins of its ideology, the Nazi-inspired origins of its ideology. And that violence looks like a lot of things. It looks like targeted assassinations, such as, for instance, the RSS is responsible for assassinating Mohandas Gandhi in 1948. They've also engaged in assassinations in more recent years, in the past 10 years or so, of various journalists and academics and intellectuals who are critical of them. Gauri Lankesh being one of the best known names from Karnataka. They engage in lynchings routinely. These are the headlines, the stories that some of you hopefully have been seeing coming out of India, of oftentimes Muslims or Dalits, those formerly known as untouchables, being accused of being in possession of beef or of having killed a cow. And whether the accusation is true or not, although as though it matters, a mob will oftentimes assemble and either beat the person or lynch the person. And this has become such a routine thing in India over the past 8 years in particular, that it's almost impossible to keep up with the stories. Terrorist bombings. Now, I mentioned, for instance, Mohan Bhagwat, the current chief of the RSS. I believe in 2008, there was a terrorist bombing which killed, I believe, dozens of Muslims. As I recall, it was initially attempted to pin the perpetrators as Muslims, actually, despite the victims being Muslims. But then a whistleblower came out. A man, an RSS member, a Swami, was arrested and then spoke with a prominent magazine in India and confessed that he had actually been in company, personal private company of Mohan Bhagwat, the chief of the RSS, and a couple of other senior members, senior leaders, and that Mohan Bhagwat had personally sanctioned this Swami to engage in this terrorist bombing. Also looks like small-scale pogroms, which happen quite often. We saw one of the last major ones was in 2020, in February 2020 in Delhi. About 50 Muslims were killed over the space of a few days. The pogrom was, RSS members participated, and the pogrom was instigated by members of the ruling BJP, the RSS's political wing, including, as I recall correctly, a cabinet minister. It also looks like large-scale pogroms, and these are some of the major ones that we've seen. This one here is actually one of the least known, but right around 1947, before India gained independence, and before partition occurred, Gilbarca went up. Gilbarca, the second and longest serving chief of the RSS, he went up to Jammu and Kashmir, and he met with the Maharaja up there. And then a couple of days later, a pogrom broke out against the Muslims, in which the Maharaja's soldiers linked up with the RSS cadres in the area and slaughtered anywhere from, and the history is a little murky on this one, but it's quite well established that it occurred. They slaughtered anywhere from 20,000 to some sources, some Western sources say upwards of 200,000 Muslims. Of course, there was the 1992 Babri Masjid destruction, which after the Babri Masjid in Uttar Pradesh was destroyed by an RSS-led mob, including by a man who was, I believe, had just been the president of the BJP and was to become the vice president of India. After that mosque was destroyed, across large swath of the country, over 2,000 Muslims approximately were slaughtered. Of course, most importantly, here in the 21st century, we have 2002 Gujarat. And this happened, this is particularly significant because it happened under the auspices of Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India, was chief minister, essentially head of state of Gujarat at the time. And when he had just assumed office, I believe, just a couple of months earlier, just a couple of months after he assumed office, a pogrom broke out against Muslims throughout almost the entire state. Men, women, and children were slaughtered systematically for about 3 days in an organized fashion, with members of the RSS's religious wing, the VHP, and the BJP participating. There were actual elected officials that were BJP elected officials leading this, and thereafter, after the violence ended, and over the next couple of years, multiple people, including a member of a BJP elected official who was a member of the state cabinet, came out and blew the whistle and implicated, said that Modi had orchestrated the pogrom and allowed the pogrom to go ahead. He was subsequently assassinated. Police officer Sanjeev Bhatt, senior police officer who was there, said that he was privy to Modi sanctioning the pogrom as well. And a lot more evidence has come out, including participants in the pogrom who were caught on camera, who said on camera that yes, they participated in the pogrom and that yes, Modi sanctioned it. Well, and then of course there have been there's this one in Odisha, the state of Odisha, against Christians. So as the RSS basically rules India today, I want to show you what that looks like. What's the RSS doing today, this year, this month, this past 6 months? And a quick word of caution, I know we should probably all be adults here, but none of these videos portray any actual violence, but some of them do contain violent language and emotionally upsetting images. And none of it's explicit, but it's not recommended for kids or those with weak constitutions. All of this, I believe, is from the past 4 to 6 months, a lot of it from the past 1 to 2 months. And this is in Delhi. Delhi, of course, as we all know, is the capital of India. This was in December 2021. And just take a listen. And if you don't know Hindi, then all of these conveniently have subtitles. Now, this oath-taking ceremony, again, remember this is in Delhi, this is being led by an RSS member who's also a very prominent media personality who's well known throughout the entire country. They're taking an oath to fight, die, and kill. And I do appreciate, I think, I'm not sure if it's the translation or if that's the way in which it was originally structured, but I do have a little bit of a chuckle at the structure of fight, die, and kill. I hope that if they're going to follow through on this oath, that they maintain that fight, die, and kill pattern, because that last one might be a little bit more difficult for them to follow through on if the die one happens before they get around to the killing. Anyways, next one. This I believe this was in the state of Madhya Pradesh about 2-3 months ago. So Islam is a fast poison, Christianity is a slow poison, but both of them should be wiped off of this earth. This here is a oath-taking ceremony. Happened, I believe, about a month ago, where a group of women are taking an oath to engage in economic boycott of Muslims. So RSS Rule of India looks like that. RSS Rule of India also looks like this. Another oath-taking ceremony. She doesn't care if we go to prison, but what we do care about is decreasing the population of Muslims. And so they're taking an oath to become soldiers and kill 20 lakh Muslims. 20 lakh is about 2 million. So they're taking an oath to kill 2 million Muslims. And then this next one. this is what RSS Rule of India also looks like. And this man, his name is Praveen Togadia. He's the former leader of the VHP. The VHP, if you recall, is the religious wing of the RSS. And what they're doing here is distributing weapons and taking an oath about how to use those weapons. Arm 20 million youth in India and wipe out or drive out 5 million Muslims. And what they're arming them with, and keep in mind that these youth they're arming teenagers. They're arming jobless, uneducated teenagers or young men in their early 20s who are impoverished and who are being brainwashed into this ideology and being given weapons. And this is the weapon they're being given. It's called the Tritial. This is specially designed, custom designed for the VHP. And this weapon was widely used in 2002 Gujarat in the slaughter of Muslims. Now, RSS Rule of India also looks like this. This is the Bajrang dog. Now I ask you, as you look at this video, if you knew that these people were members of an organization which is being armed and which embraces an ideology which thinks that, say you're a Muslim, for instance, thinks that, that you're foreign to the country, or that you're a traitor to the country because you're Muslim, how comfortable would you feel watching these people parade by you in the middle of the street in your city? RSS Rule of India also looks like this. This happened when a Hindu nationalist demagogue drove up outside of a mosque. And I believe that this happened during Ramadan, I believe. So he is driving up, parking outside of a mosque on a loudspeaker and shouting at the Muslims of the mosque that, well, if any of them happen to bother a Hindu girl, whatever that means, then he's going to pick up and rape their women. He's going to pick up and rape the Muslim women. And RSS Rule of India also looks like this, and this did happen during Ramadan. RSS Rule of India looks like a rave. Looks like a rave out of the worst nightmare. It looks like mobs of hundreds or thousands of armed, probably drugged up youth brandishing weapons and throwing a rave in front of a mosque. And yes, this happened during Ramadan, I believe. And that video always disturbs me every time I listen to it, just the sound of it. Now, RSS Rule of India doesn't always look like the armed mob courteously staying outside and courteously throwing their rave outside of the mosque. Sometimes it looks like the armed mob passing by the mosque and symbolically taking it over. It looks like they're thugs climbing on top and planting the saffron flag, which is the symbol of the RSS, on top of the mosque. And so, job done. Having claimed that mosque for themselves as their own, they pass on, perhaps going to another mosque to claim it. RSS Rule of India looks like occupation. And keep in mind that these, as you should be able to sense by now, these are not one-off incidents. These sorts of incidents have happened all over India in the past 6 months to a year. And it's impossible, even for me as a full-time professional tracking things like this and talking about these issues, it's become impossible for me to keep up with every single incident. Now, so that's bad. Situation's pretty horrible. And it's worrying for India. It's worrying for South Asia, in fact. It's worrying for the world. From a humanitarian perspective, it's worrying, but it's also very concerning from the perspective of global stability. You know, India, of course, being the second largest nation in the world by population, the world's largest democracy, the hub of South Asia, and India also being a country which the US and others are looking to as some kind of a bulwark against the influence of China and Russia. But, you know, we all know injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's true. But what exactly does this have to do with the USA? Does it have anything specifically to do with us? Now, remember that chart that I showed you, showing the song Paravar, the family of Hindu nationalist organizations. Again, I want you to notice HSS, and I want you to notice the OFBJP. The HSS is the Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, and it is the international wing of the RSS. It's populated to a large extent by people that either were members of the RSS when they were back in India, or that come from RSS families. The HSS around the world also believe about once every 5 years, their leaders will return to India for a summit, an HSS RSS summit in which they engage in training hosted by the RSS. The HSS also routinely will bring RSS executives over from India to the US to tour around the different HSS chapters. And then there's the OFBJP. OFBJP is the Overseas Friends of the BJP. Well, you know, we have both the HSS and the OFBJP here in America, and they're active. They're very active. They're hugely active. This, for instance, occurred in Houston a couple of years ago, I believe. This is the HSS marching in Houston. And pay attention, notice if you have been tracking along, notice these pictures that they have at the head of their parade. This is Hedgavar, and this is Gilbarca. Hedgavar and Gilbarca, of course, being the first two chiefs of the RSS, thus rather non-subtly giving away the HSS's connection to the RSS. Now, recall that video of the RSS that we began with. Does this remind you of that at all? Sure, smaller, a little bit less militant, but rather similar in overall tone. I've referred to the RSS as Nazi-inspired. I call the RSS a fascist organization. Well, fascism is all about uniformity and conformity. And notice that these people are uniformed. They're wearing the HSS uniform. But sometimes the HSS wears the RSS uniform, essentially. HSS and OFBJP, I want to get to them a little bit. They are separate organizations in America, but their membership is very, very much interlinked. Members of the HSS are often members of the OFBJP, and members of the OFBJP are usually members of HSS. This, for instance, is Ramesh Buttada. Ramesh Buttada is probably one of, if not the most important people to talk about in America in relation to the HSS, the international wing of the RSS. He lives in Houston, he's an industrialist, but he also happens to be the most active and prominent public face of the HSS's activities in America. And he's the vice president of the HSS USA, the American branch of the HSS. Here he is, this was, I believe in 2011, this picture was taken. He's in, I believe in Pune, and he's at a HSS, or at an RSS training camp. He's pictured here with a fellow delegation from Texas. This gentleman, for instance, is Ramesh Shah. Ramesh Shah is another one of the most important figures to be aware of in context of these organizations. He also lives in Texas, I believe in Houston. And he's got a 30-year track record of organizing, not just with HSS, here he is a member of the HSS, but with the OFBJP. Ramesh Shah, for instance, every election cycle, from what I've seen, for at least the past 20 years, will return to India to campaign. He's an American citizen, but he goes back to India every election cycle to campaign to get the BJP elected there. And incidentally, Ramesh Shah also happens to be the father of a woman named Sonal Shah. Sonal Shah is an interesting figure who's she's not a politician, she's not an elected official, but she's more of a bureaucrat, more of somebody who moves within the circles of power. Sonal Shah, the daughter of Ramesh Shah, just a couple of months ago was appointed as an advisor to the Department of Homeland Security. So again, notice all these guys are wearing the RSS uniform. Now, in 2014, this is some of what the OFBJP has done and the HSS have done. It's difficult to talk about them as separate organizations, though they may be legally separate. In 2014, when Modi was first elected PM of India, Prime Minister of India, these groups, OFBJP and HSS, provided immense help. They mobilized hundreds, actually they mobilized across all networks in the USA, thousands and possibly as many as 5,000 people to travel from America to India to campaign for Modi. And again, many if most of these, are US citizens who they support the BJP, but their support for the BJP as US citizens includes actually going to the country where they no longer have citizenship and working to get the BJP elected. Now, I want to ask you to briefly think about it this way. Imagine if thousands of Americans had moved to Russia, renounced, given up their US citizenship, and become Russian citizens. Now imagine if during America's 2020 presidential election, thousands of those American expatriates traveled to America to go around the country campaigning for a certain political party. Do you think we would be outraged? Do you think we would consider it to be foreign interference in our nation's sacred and sovereign elections? And that's something that, especially for those of you who are of Indian origin, I would just ask you to kind of dwell on. Now, in 2014, when Modi was campaigning, the Overseas Friends of the BJP actually started long before that. They started early, super early, on their plans to campaign from America to get Modi elected in India. In 2011, in fact, here Ramesh Shah, and not pictured, but Ramesh Buttada was also there. The HSS and the OFBJP hosted a first of its kind training camp in Houston to teach volunteers how to campaign for the BJP, both from America and by traveling from America to India to do it in India itself. And they actually brought, it's not mentioned here in this clipping, but they actually brought a BJP official over from India to instruct them and teach them at this training camp. The OFBJP's mobilization push to get Modi elected in India was really massive. You know, aside from the thousands that volunteered with the OFBJP to travel all the way back to India to actually campaign as boots on the ground, they also conducted huge phone banks in America, working around the clock, it's said here, to call back voters in India, to call from America, to call voters in India to tell them to vote for the BJP. You can see at this phone bank, they had approximately 700 people working around the clock. Ramesh Buttada of the HSS compares it to the preparations for an Indian wedding. And then, of course, it says here, you know, it was actually more in the thousands, but several hundred actually traveled back to India. Now, after Modi was elected, the OFBJP continued operating in the US as a PR machine, a propaganda mouthpiece to promote Modi, the BJP, and its Hindu nationalist policies in India. They do this a lot of ways. They do it by organizing protests in the streets here in America. They do it by pressuring American lawmakers not to talk about human rights in India, and so on. And they also really helped to build up Modi up among the Indian American community. One of the major ways that they've done this is through what I call rock star receptions. That's how they heavily promote him. They bring Modi over here and they host receptions for him. Larger and larger every time. They had first at Madison Square Garden in New York City in 2014, then they had in San Jose in 2015, and then they had in 2019, Howdy Modi in Houston, Texas, which there were approximately 50,000 attending. And it's a chance, I believe, for Modi to kind of pay back everything he actually owes to these American song groups, these American RSS groups, who were, I believe, very crucial to helping get him elected. And it's also a chance for him to build up his propaganda machinery in America. And the last major rockstar reception, as I mentioned, was Howdy Modi in Houston, which the home of the HSS's Ramesh Buttada. Buttada's son, incidentally, helped organize this one. And one of the most shocking outcomes of this entire event, and you can see here, the auditorium, it was huge. This was packed out. There were 50,000 people estimated inside, but there were, and I was one of them, there were 20,000 people estimated by Houston police protesting outside. But one of the most shocking outcomes of this whole event was one thing that Modi happened to say there. Now, Trump joined Modi at this event. And I want you to pay attention to what Modi says.
In India, have connected well with President Trump. The words of candidate Trump, ab ki baar, Trump sarkar.
So in retrospect, that's a little bit humorous because we know how things ended. But for those of you who don't speak Hindi, ab ki baar Trump sarkar essentially means once more the Trump regime. Essentially, it's Modi endorsing Trump for re-election. Keep in mind, this is September 2019. Trump is running for re-election. And here we have a foreign politician, a foreign head of state on stage on American soil, standing next to a up for re-election president and endorsing him for re-election. And you know, forget for a moment the credentials, the pogrom-tainted credentials of Modi. Forget for a moment Trump and everything that's problematic about him. Even if these were the best and the brightest leaders that we had in the world, we still do have here a foreign politician during election season on our soil endorsing our up for re-election president for re-election. Now, if that smacks of foreign interference, then I think, in my opinion, that's because this is foreign interference, open and public. So if all of this sounds a little bit suspicious, well, I forgot I had this slide in here, but I do want to make sure that we highlight this. Speaking of foreign interference, again, during election season, this was February of 2020. Now, we had just had in September 2019, Trump or Modi visit America and essentially de facto endorse Trump for re-election. A few months later, in February 2020, February 2020 was when we had a pogrom, a BJP RSS pogrom of Muslims in Delhi. And Trump wasn't saying much about it. And so Bernie Sanders came out and kind of criticized Trump for his silence and said that it wasn't representative of what the leader of America should be doing, and that he should be speaking out. And he himself criticized the violence. And then top BJP political leader, party leader, came out on Twitter and openly, in so many words, responded to Bernie Sanders and said, well, you know, we don't want to, but because you said this, we may have to interfere in America's elections. So once more, no subtlety about it, overt, blatant foreign interference, or in that case, a threat of foreign interference. So if all of this sounds a bit suspicious, well, I think that the US government might have thought that too. In 2020, after the OFBJP had been in operation since 1992 for nearly 30 years in America, and after the OFBJP had worked from America to get Modi elected in India, and after the OFBJP and other organizations organized these rockstar receptions for Modi in America, including this one where Modi endorsed our president for re-election. Finally, in August of 2020, the OFBJP was compelled to register as a foreign agent here in America. And they're still in operation, but they are now much more under the radar of the US government and much more obligated to be transparent. But before the OFBJP was registered as a foreign agent, they were a lot more active in US federal politics. In fact, one of the politicians that they were particularly close to was Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii. And you can see her here on the left in 2014 at an OFBJP banquet. This banquet was hosted by the Overseas Friends of the BJP for the purpose of celebrating the election of Modi in 2014. And this man that she's posing with is the international chief of the OFBJP, or was, who is a Indian citizen who is a foreign politician. And oh, what's she wearing? Yeah, she's wearing, this is a member of US Congress wearing the colors of, the logo of, promoting a foreign political party. And not just any foreign political party, but a foreign political party which is the political wing of the world's oldest, largest, and fastest growing fascist movement, the RSS. And on the right here, you can see, she actually did this twice. I believe this was the first time on the right here. This is taken in Los Angeles, and this is taken in Atlanta. Oh, and then we also have, and this is just one of actually many pictures I could show you. Here we have, I believe this is in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that this was about 2013. And there is the now former Congresswoman sitting at a HSS event, sitting as a guest of honor, and she was a speaker there at an event hosted by the international wing of the RSS. And oh, now it helps if you know who these people are. The significance is much greater once you learn who these people are. There is the former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard at her own wedding in Hawaii with Ramesh Buttada from Houston, who flew all the way to Hawaii to attend this Congresswoman's wedding. He's one of her longest time, largest donors. And as you recall, he is president of the American wing of the RSS. He's vice president of the American wing of the RSS. This is his son. This is Ramesh Buttada's cousin-in-law, cousin by marriage, I believe. And Tulsi Gabbard, however, is not alone in rubbing shoulders with and hobnobbing with the American wing of the RSS. We also have person that may be familiar to any of you who happen to be from the Chicagoland area. We also have Congressman Raja Krishnamurti. Here he is at a HSS event. He was the keynote speaker at this event, unsurprisingly, considering he is a congressman. And what's interesting about this event is that this wasn't just any HSS event. I believe this happened in late September 2019, if I recall correctly. But this wasn't just any HSS event. And of course, it would be bad enough if, you know, any congressperson, you know, or Raja here is showing up to speak at a HSS event. But this one happened to be an HSS event organized to celebrate the founding of the RSS. And as they were celebrating it, well, I mean, it's a little bit hidden here. They didn't have a good photographer, unfortunately, at this event, so I don't have the best pictures to show you. I only have the media that they provided. But take a look at the pictures behind Raja Krishnamurti, the pictures he's sharing the stage with. Back here, right behind his left shoulder, that would be, is KB Hedgavar, the first chief of the RSS. And right here, you can see a lot better, is MS Gilbarca. This is Gilbarca, the second chief of the RSS and its ideological father. And what did Gilbarca say? I've been talking for a while, so you may not recall, so I'm gonna jog your memory. Oh yeah, Gilbarca said to keep up the purity of the race and its culture. Germany, Nazi Germany, shocked the world by her purging the country of the Semitic races, the Jews. Race pride at its highest has been manifested here. Nazi Germany has also shown how well nigh impossible it is for races and cultures having differences going to the root to be assimilated into one united whole, a good lesson for us in Hindustan, that is India, to learn and profit by. Gilbarca basically pointed to Nazi Germany and said that the groundwork that had been laid for the Holocaust was a good model to follow and an example of race pride being manifested. He basically said that he liked what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. And here we have a US congressman, and keep in mind, here we have a US congresswoman at the time in this picture, but she's no longer in office. She ran for president in 2020. She lost miserably. And then she decided not to run for re-election to Congress, thank God. So she's no longer in office. This gentleman, however, remains in office in Chicago area. And here he is sharing the stage with garlanded, and note that they are garlanded, meaning they're being celebrated, photos of the first two chiefs of the RSS, one of whom is the ideological father of this paramilitary, who specifically praised the Nazi treatment of the Jews, and who went far beyond that, you know, as we were talking about, just touching briefly and just the tip of the iceberg of the ideology earlier, who also called Christians and Muslims traitors and foreigners and internal threats to the country. And here we have a congressman sharing the stage with the person, with a garlanded photo of the person who said all of that, at an event that's being organized to celebrate the paramilitary which follows that ideology. You know, I could go on about other politicians, but we do have, I'm just gonna wrap up with this one because we could go on. And there's a lot more that could and should be added to this presentation. But we have, for instance, this gentleman, and he's not a one-off example, but I want to pick on him for a second. Especially because he's blocked me on Twitter for pointing this out. And so I have to tell somebody somewhere. Rishi Kumar is a Saratoga, California city councilor. He has been for, I believe, a couple of terms. He ran for Congress in that area a couple of years ago. He lost, but he's running again. And he was a big supporter. This was taken in 2019. He's a big RSS Bjp supporter. And I'll just leave it at showing you yet another candidate for Congress in this case, actually flashing advertising promoting the colors, the logo of a foreign political party, of the political wing of the RSS, a fascist paramilitary. And well, you know, I was going to wrap up, but I'm almost done. So here we have, I mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is no longer in office. And I have no solid proof, but I believe that one thing that might have contributed to her departing office sooner rather than later was this article that I wrote about her in August 2019. 18,000 words documenting in excruciating detail everything I could find, every single thing I could find about how she had participated in RSS in America events over a period of many years, about the RSS officials that she'd met in India and in America, about the RSS events that she attended in India, about the donations, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations actually, that she had received in a clearly targeted, funneled manner from leaders and members, especially leaders of RSS in America organizations. I believe in the first few years that she was in office, what I documented, and it might be more than this, but what I documented was anywhere, year by year, anywhere from like 20 to 25% of her total campaign donations in that year would be coming from those sources. Now, after I wrote this article, Congressman Ro Khanna, surprisingly, out of the blue, came on my Twitter account and commented on it. He affirmed it as an important article. And then he said this. Now, I wish Congressman Ro Khanna would say more, because since he said this, he hasn't said much. But I understand why, because he's received immense backlash for this. And I'll mention a little bit of that backlash in a moment. But he said, it is the duty of every American politician of Hindu faith, wonder if that includes Congressman Raja Krishnamurti, duty of every American politician of Hindu faith to stand for pluralism, reject Hindutva, that is Hindu nationalism, that is the ideology of the RSS, and speak for equal rights for Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Christians. Now, that's beautiful. Ro Khanna is an Indian origin politician. Ro Khanna is a Hindu. But Ro Khanna is also a Hindu who understands the evils and the dangers of Hindutva, of Hindu nationalism. So, you know, he took this stand. He called it the duty of every American politician of Hindu faith to reject Hindutva. It was a bold, it was a courageous, and it was a principled stand. And what happened as a result of it? Well, Ro Khanna's stand against Hindutva caused the HSS and the OFBJP members in the Bay Area of California to prop up a pro-Hindutva candidate to try and steal his seat in US Congress. And they picked Ritesh Tandon. Ritesh Tandon, he ran against Khanna and he lost in 2020. He's now running again. He's still trying to unseat Khanna. You know, here's what he proudly boasted about. He boasted about his father's strong RSS credentials. And he openly said he said this in, I believe, India West newspaper. He openly said that his motivation, apparently his entire motivation for running for US Congress, you know, you'd think like more jobs or better healthcare, I don't know, something, but no, it was he was motivated to run for US Congress because of Ro Khanna's anti-Hindutva comments. And who are these people that Ritesh Tandon is pictured with? And keep in mind, this picture was taken, it's available, I believe, on his Facebook. It was taken while he was on the campaign trail, I believe in October of 2019 or something like that. And on the right here, is a man named Chandru Bamra, who is former president of the OFBJP, as well as, I believe, current president of the HSS Bay Area chapter. And in the center, and keep in mind, US congressional candidate on the campaign trail at this very moment, in the center is Sambit Patra. And Sambit Patra is an official spokesperson of the BJP in India. He's an Indian politician. And then former president of the international wing of the BJP and US congressional candidate. and U.S. congressional candidate who was running for Congress specifically to unseat a congressman who happened to have the courage to stand out and speak out just a little bit against Hindu nationalism. So there is a lot more we could discuss. I am working on expanding this presentation as there are other aspects that need to be mentioned. I would like to go into, for instance, how in September of 2021, just last year, the acting ambassador, US ambassador to India at the time, a man named Atul Keshav, went to the RSS's headquarters, met the chief of the RSS, posed for pictures with them, did a photo op with them, and then promoted it on Twitter. I would like to talk about how I reacted to that immediately and began covering it journalistically, organizing joint letters against it, organizing webinars against it, and so on, and how coincidentally, when we started a petition, we launched a petition demanding his resignation in September 2021. Coincidentally, this ambassador, this diplomat who had 28 years of service, just 2 years short of 30 years, who had 28 years of service in the US Foreign Service, in January 2022, left the diplomatic service and is no longer a diplomat, and left with this as a final blemish on his reputation. He now happens to be head of the US-India Business Council. Atul Keshav is, in January or February of this year, was appointed, was picked up as president of the US-India Business Council. There's other aspects I would like to get into. I'd like to talk about Padma Kupa, who is a state house, who is in the Michigan State House of Representatives, has been for a couple of terms, and who is now running for election to the Michigan State Senate. I'd like to talk about a lot of these other aspects. But one thing I do want to talk about before we move on is the question of what can you do? What can we do? And I'm sure people may have this question, and I do have some other answers related to it. But you know, for now, for this very second, one thing we can do, or one thing you can do, is I recommend starting, if you're not already educated about these issues, I recommend getting informed, and I recommend doing that by buying, of course, but buying and reading my book. Please, if you get it, don't let it sit on your bookshelf. It must be read. It's intended to be read. It's useless if it's not read. It's this book I published in 2020, August 2020. It's a pretty easy to read primer on the topic. It's designed, it's written to be accessible to an audience that doesn't know anything about these issues at all. It's designed to be easily digestible by people who are not from India, not from South Asia, who aren't familiar with any of the situation there. It's designed to be easy access. And I would say one thing about it, which is the best compliment I ever received in reference to it, is that my writing reads like fiction. And as a writer, I take that as a huge compliment because it means that it's engaging for people. And I've heard back from everyone that's read this that it is a page turner. So if you want to know what the RSS is, if you want to know what it believes, what it has done in history, what it's doing in India today up until 2020, and a little bit touched on in this book, how it's connected to America. And I will, for any of you who are in Chicago, I will mention that the first chapter of this book opens up with recounting of my experiences walking with Indian Americans in Chicago in 2018 who were protesting against the presence of the RSS chief speaking in Lombard, Illinois, in Raja Krishnamurti's district. So if you're interested in that first chapter, if you happen to be living in Chicago, this book is available on Amazon. It's actually available in most countries on Amazon, but if I don't know if we have anybody from outside of America who might be watching, but if you're in India, it is available in print, but not on Amazon. And just message me if you want to know where to buy it in India. So this book, This book, hopefully if you read this and digest this, this will help you to be able to talk about the issue of Hindu nationalism, the RSS, and why it's a threat, and why it's fascist, and why it's Nazi inspired. Because at the end of the day, I'm just one voice, and I'm going to keep talking, but you need to be talking too. And you need to be talking in a way which is informed. So beyond that, after you, if you're not already, then after you get informed and educated, this may sound basic, but I really think that it helps. I think there needs to be chatter. There needs to be word of mouth. People need to be talking. I would say, don't be afraid to talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, make conversation about it around the water cooler. Find any excuse. I mean, don't harass people, but find any excuse to bring it up. Hey, do you know what's happening in India? Have you heard about it? It's interesting. It's scary, but it's interesting. Do that. I would say contact your congressional representative. And, this may sound intimidating, but it's not. For one thing, that could be something as easy as simply picking up the phone, picking up the phone, Googling their local district office, finding out what the phone number is, calling it, and just speaking to the staffer and saying, hello, I'm a constituent. Hello, I'm a constituent. And as a constituent, I'm very concerned about the religious persecution that's happening in India right now. I'm very concerned about, the presence of the RSS in India. I'm very concerned about the presence of the RSS in America, et cetera. It's something, whatever you want to say. And take 2 minutes. I don't know that a lot of people out there who are concerned about these issues that are doing this. I think maybe because it seems intimidating, but it's simple. It's not intimidating. It's a really low investment on your time, and it works. If you start doing it, start with 1, start with 2, then you have 1,000 people. If 1,000 people from Chicago were calling Raja Krishnamurti's office and saying this, imagine what might happen. And beyond that, if any of you happen to have seen, as my kind host mentioned at the outset, I did go. I believe you mentioned. I did go on Thursday, just a few days back. I'm in Chicago, and on Thursday, by myself, I popped into Raja Krishnamurti's office. I was polite. I was courteous. I think Raja Krishnamurti is a corrupt politician and not a good guy who needs to be booted out of office as quickly as possible. But that's no reason to be a jerk when I'm visiting. So I was polite and I was courteous. And I knocked on the door. They let me in. I talked with them for 2 minutes. I dropped off information. I filmed it in order to spread word about the issue. That's something any of you can do too. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with a buddy. You can do it with 2 or 3 buddies. But that's something that I really, if you're concerned about these issues, I would really consider encouraging you to do, whether it's Raja's office or that of some other congressional representative. And in the case of Raja, I wanted it to be respectful but confrontational. In the case of other members of Congress who don't have these concerning ties to the RSS like this congressman does, it's not necessary to always be so confrontational. And then another thing I would say is organize more events like this. And I would say get it offline at this point. Thank God we're coming out of the pandemic. We can do in person today. We can do in person these days. And I love doing these events. I love doing these events in person. I would like to be doing these events a lot more. I want to be in front of audiences, warning them about what's happening in India and warning them about how it does impact us here in America. So in conclusion, I'll just leave you with this, that please, whatever you do as you may go away from listening to me, if you agree with anything that I said, then I would say that that's great, but it's useless if you don't do something. Please take action, because the stakes have never been higher than they are right now. As you can see, experts today. There was this one, another one a month ago, who's associated with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. They're warning, no hyperbole, no exaggeration, that there is a risk of impending genocide of Muslims and other minorities under RSS rule in India today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for a very thorough presentation.